This week on Christian World News, the voters who will swing this election. Evangelicals will determine who gets a seat in the Oval Office. What could cause them to rush to the polls or stay home this November? Plus, celebrating freedom, 13 evangelical pastors imprisoned in Nicaragua are now free. We'll tell you how it all happened. And for the first time since the Cold War, the Navy is expanding its chaplain corps. See what's behind this new push for spiritual readiness. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Christian World News. I'm George Thomas. Evangelical voters get a lot of attention around presidential elections due to their size and impact here in the U.S. In 2016, for example, they unified behind Donald Trump, helping him win the White House. This time, however, division on abortion could get in the way. CBN's chief political analyst David Brody has that story.
But we got to do that, fellas, you know?
In a presidential election seen as razor close, Donald Trump will once again need conservative evangelicals fully behind him if he hopes to be reelected in November. There's a difference this time around, however. Tony Perkins is with the Family Research Council and keeps a finger on the pulse of the evangelical grassroots.
The temperature is not as high as it was in 2016 and 2020 when it comes to who they're supporting.
The main reason comes down to abortion. In the past, Trump courted evangelicals, promising staunchly pro-life policies, and he delivered. Since the decision overturning Roe v. Wade, however, the abortion issue has led to political defeats for Republicans. That's led to Trump's refusal to endorse a federal abortion ban and his willingness to support abortion pill access through the mail. He also declared that he would be, quote, great for women and their reproductive rights, toxic language Democrats use to push abortion. Sean Spicer is Trump's former press secretary.
Look, for an election that comes down to thousands of votes in handfuls of states, I think this is bad. This is it. It doesn't keep a key part of the Republican/conservative base excited. This was key to his victory last time with the judges, and he's undermining it. These are unforced errors right now, as far as I'm concerned.
So has there been a shift? In an interview with CBN News, Trump campaign spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt pushes back on that assumption.
I would reject that there's been a shift, David. I think President Trump has been consistent and clear, even in his first term as president, that the issue of abortion is one he believes and one the pro-life community has fought to bring back to the states.
The Trump campaign is fully aware it needs evangelicals to show up bigly to win. That's why it quickly cleaned up another potential mess when the former president appeared to favor voting for a Florida amendment that would essentially get rid of the state's 6-week ban on abortion.
I am going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks.
Less than 24 hours later, he clarified his position, saying the amendment that would legalize abortion through the 9th month is a no-go.
All of that stuff is unacceptable. So I'll be voting no for that reason.
Marjorie Dannenfelser with the SBA list acknowledges the messaging has been confusing to the pro-life voters that they are trying to get to the polls.
The threat would be that people stay home because they can't sort out what's the better choice. So it's our job to say, yes, I see where you're coming from, but it's still the better choice to go with the candidates that will preserve states' rights to pass pro-life laws. To be perfectly honest, I'm going door to door to do everything I can to keep Harris out of office.
He's not Kamala Harris. He's not advocating for abortion until birth at taxpayer expense. So we have to choose that which is least offensive or that which more clearly aligns with biblical truth.
But the jury is still out if that's going to translate into the same enthusiasm.
I do think what is going to happen is that you're going to have a lack of enthusiasm, which means people aren't going to vote for the other side. I mean, I always hear this question. You've heard it, David. Where are your people going to go? Well, the issue is they're not going to go anywhere. Some of them are going to stay home, and that's the last thing we need.
There is a plan in place, with the Faith and Freedom Coalition busier than ever on the ground.
We're knocking on 10 million doors. We're making 10 million get out the vote calls. We're sending 28 million get out the vote texts.
CEO Ralph Reed believes born-again, Bible-believing evangelical voter turnout will be bigger than in 2016 or 2020. While abortion has been tricky, supporters maintain Trump still advocates for conservative pro-family policies. Also, this time around, new federal election rules allow the Trump campaign to work with outside groups like Faith and Freedom to mobilize voters. Reed has a warning to conservative Christian voters who stay home.
And I will tell you this. Donald Trump sometimes says and does things that I wish he wouldn't say or do. But he is the most pro-life advocate we've ever had sitting behind the Resolute desk, sitting in the Oval Office. He delivered for us. This is about the sanctity of life. If they stay home, then they don't deserve to have this victory. They don't deserve to have leaders like that.
As for the campaign, it recently launched its Believers for Trump coalition.
The evangelical community is a massive part of our campaign, and we need them to win on November the 5th. And our campaign understands that. President Trump understands that.
The campaign says this group has signed up more than 2,000 church captains to educate fellow evangelicals on getting out to vote and the choice before them.
We're also targeting low propensity evangelical voters who may not be political, may not have voted in past election cycles, but we have teams on the ground across the battleground state that are focused on doing just that.
Also this week, the campaign announced a new Catholics for Trump coalition. Trump world fully aware an all-hands-on-deck approach is needed as the country heads toward the fall election. The question will be whether evangelicals stick with Trump to once again be his saving grace. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, David. Up next, in Nicaragua, they were falsely imprisoned for more than 8 months. Now, a group of evangelical leaders are celebrating their freedom. Welcome back to Christian World News. 13 evangelical Christians are among 135 political prisoners released this week from a Nicaraguan prison. The 13 worked with the Texas-based Mountain Gateway Ministry and are now safe in Guatemala. They were arrested last December after more than 1 million people attended revival meetings in stadiums throughout the country. 2 leaders released from prison were reunited with their young children they last saw 8 months ago. In what religious freedom experts called a sham trial, they were convicted under anti-money laundering statutes and sentenced to 12 to 15 years in prison, plus a total of $1 billion in fines. Mountain Gateway President Britt Hancock lobbied the U.S. State Department and members of Congress to help get the Christians free. He is joining us now for more. Britt, congratulations. Give us your reaction to these Christians being set free.
That's my reaction, just super excited, and I don't know how to calm that down. So I'm sorry if that was a little bit explosive, but you wanted my reaction. That's my reaction. Jesus can do anything. That's what.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Congratulations, as I said, to your entire ministry. What role did the U.S. State Department and members of Congress play?
Critical roles. It was really a matrix of things that needed to happen in order to get the dictatorship in Nicaragua to yield. And really, from that standpoint, they had to decide to have mercy on our people and turn them loose. And we're thrilled that they did. Congress's actions, we had multiple members of Congress make noise, write letters, introduce legislation, do floor speeches, social media posts, news interviews, and things of that nature. That was critical. The State Department has been just amazing, super accessible to us and the U.S. Embassy, the Department of Homeland Security, the White House got involved. And so, actions like this don't happen unless there's a robust response, bipartisan response on the part of Congress, and then really everybody deciding to drop the partisanship and allow politics to take second place to the issues at hand. And so we're just so thankful to the White House and the State Department and Congress.
Yeah. Have you talked to the folks, to your people, and what are they saying to you?
We've talked to two of them. We're waiting to talk to the rest of them. They're just overjoyed at this point, and that a couple of them I know went through their journeys, and the conditions in prison were really terrible, and the ones that I talked to that I know, they really turned to God and had significant encounters with him, and went to work to share their faith. And I know for sure that at least a dozen people got led to Jesus inside the prison. And but our members were held, the ones that I talked to were held often in solitary confinement, so they didn't have access to each other or other inmates. There were times that they did, but we're thrilled. They're so happy to be released.
Yeah. Nicaragua's government is targeting churches and religious nonprofits. Why are they persecuting the church?
Well, there's likely multiple reasons. They're trying to control dissent. They're trying to eliminate any voices besides their own voices. The freedom of the gospel doesn't go well with their control and their totalitarian ideas. Communism, they're straight up communist. And so throughout the history of communism in the world, that this is the pattern. They just seize control of all the narratives. They don't want anybody to have influence in the news or social media. And the gospel pushes back and is a threat to that. And but the real reason is the spirit of Antichrist that hates the gospel and loves to cause human suffering.
Yeah. Real quickly, in the last 30 seconds, tell us about the spiritual hunger of the people of Nicaragua.
The spiritual hunger is explosive. We saw a growing, really dramatic response. Hundreds of thousands of people were responding and coming to our meetings in 2023, and it was just growing and growing, and just very open, and they're I would say aggressively hungry for God.
Yeah. Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Britt, congratulations again to your entire team, and just really people around the world praying for their release. So, Britt, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Coming up, a new military push for spiritual readiness. How the Chaplain Corps here in the U.S. helps bring transformation to soldiers right after this. Welcome back to Christian World News. The Pentagon is addressing a new need in our armed forces, what one leader calls spiritual readiness. National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke explores the growing demand for chaplains in our military.
For the first time since the Cold War, the Navy is expanding its Chaplain Corps. This year alone, the goal is to fill 70 active duty slots, a number that would place one chaplain on board every destroyer.
A lot of the bad behaviors, a lot of the evidences of stress are reduced on ships, in units that have chaplains.
Rear Admiral Gregory Todd serves as the Navy's Chief of Chaplains, a position that also covers the Marine Corps and Coast Guard. Over the course of his career, Todd has worked as a chaplain in all three branches, responding to Ground Zero after 9/11 and deploying to both Iraq and Afghanistan.
The funny thing about being a chaplain is the most satisfying moments are in some of the most challenging times, because you're there to bring God into that situation.
With growing mental health issues threatening service members across the board, Todd says chaplains can be the tip of the spear.
We become often first responders for them as they experience some of these stress issues. Some of them are normal stressors of life, and we can help them and normalize those things. But we also work with our partners in the mental health world. When something becomes a lot more serious than just a normal stressor.
According to research from Columbia University, Duke, and Harvard, those engaged in spiritual practices are 50 to 80% less likely to die by suicide and 60% less likely to suffer depression. Todd says the Pentagon's decision to grow the Chaplain Corps is part of an effort to better care for people, a new emphasis on what he calls spiritual readiness. Now it's up to him to fill the vacancies, and he's counting on a new generation to answer the call. While a chaplain at Emory University, Lieutenant Commander Saul Burleson says God put military ministry on his heart.
When I looked at the men and women in uniform, what I found was people who were committing their lives to something greater, something greater than themselves. They were serving the Constitution. They were upholding and defending our inalienable rights.
Burleson now serves as a Navy chaplain on the USS Macon Island. While his sailors are similar in age to the college students with whom he once worked, the job responsibilities look quite different.
We're embedded with our sailors, our Marines, our Coast Guardsmen. We serve all the sea services and the men and women in uniform in those, wherever they're at, on board a ship, across the Atlantic or Pacific, with the Marines in a desert or in the Arctic. We're with them wherever they are.
Sometimes I would joke, I'd say, my job is to hang out with you guys as you do your job. But the reality is you're there to spend time, to tell stories, to go to the motor pool, to be there. And then in that life connection, transformation begins to take place. Someone needs time. People go, hey, Chaplain, you got a minute? The answer is always yes.
Lieutenant Colonel Brandon Moore is an Army chaplain. After years deploying with soldiers, he now serves as a recruiter for the chaplaincy school at Fort Jackson. As the branch with the largest chaplain corps, Moore says the Army isn't looking to grow, but rather to maintain.
We're looking at recruiting the best qualified. Really, we're looking at about 300 each year. But when you think about all of the qualifications, it is hard to find the best qualified to continue to serve.
Military chaplains are required to meet the same age and physical fitness standards as any other service member. Plus, there's educational requirements, which include a bachelor's degree, a master's in divinity or some area of religion, and then professional ministry experience.
Soldiers give up an awful lot, but they shouldn't have to give up their faith. So we want the best qualified chaplains of all different faith groups.
Second Lieutenant Michael Engelsjerd is a candidate at the Army's chaplaincy school. He felt called to minister to soldiers after his own military service. As he goes through the chaplaincy program, he's learning to view the men and women he serves alongside in a much different light.
It's a very different role. And as I'm learning things in seminary and learning about what ministry is, it's like I'm in the same places doing something completely different. And being able to draw on that experience while still having to get used to the new lens of what it means to be a chaplain.
3 decades into his career, Admiral Todd calls caring for the men and women of the armed services a sacred honor and privilege.
I said, okay, Lord, I'll do this for 4 years. I'll do one tour, and that's been over 30 years ago. This flock has a way of getting under your skin. And so then the prayer turned to, Lord, I'll do this as long as you need me to do this because I love doing it and I'm happy to do that, but I can't decide when to go home. You have to tell me. And so I'm still here until the Navy says, okay, now you have to go home. You're too old. You have to go home now.
While the Navy is currently asking for 70 additional chaplains, Todd anticipates need for even further growth, and the Marine Corps and Coast Guard are expected to follow suit. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Well, finally this week, and a very inspiring story. A small-time crime in a Virginia neighborhood sparked a big, huge community response. In fact, after a man robbed their children's lemonade stand, the Caldwell family turned it into a powerful message of faith and forgiveness. My colleague, Brody Carter, brings us the inspiring story. Take a look.
During the dog days of summer, 10-year-old Rebecca Caldwell and her 8-year-old brother Joshua were selling lemonade in front of their home in Chesapeake, Virginia, when a stranger seemingly stopped to buy a drink.
It seemed super nice.
That turned out not to be the case when the man took their $40 in earnings and sped off.
Yeah, I was really upset. And like my husband was on the phone with me when it happened.
Home security footage shows the man approaching the stand and grabbing the money jar while their mother was inside. The robbery could have left the family disheartened, but instead they chose to focus on prayer and forgiveness. Why did you pray for the man who stole your money?
Because I wanted him to become a Christian.
Rebecca and Joshua, along with their parents, quickly forgave the man who stole from them.
I just think it's better to forgive than just to always be mad at the guy, because then you're just like always going to think back on that day and be like, oh, I'm so mad at that guy.
When life handed these two young entrepreneurs a sour situation, the community really stepped up to help and gave them something that was much sweeter.
This has been incredible, mind-blowing. I mean, it's just so overwhelming.
A week after the robbery, the community came together and helped the Caldwell family raise more than $6,200 in donations at a special lemonade event.
All the people were really nice, and I got to ride on one of their motorcycles.
Immediately, there was so much support coming out of it that it's like, you know, we're blessed by this whole thing. I mean, yeah, something bad happened for a moment, but ever since that moment, it's just been blessing after blessing.
As news stations spread their story across the country, the Caldwells are using their time in the spotlight to share the gospel.
We've talked a lot about forgiveness in our interviews. Some people have asked why we choose to forgive.
Taping this heartfelt message to the lemonade stand, the Caldwells pointed those who stopped by toward the cross, turning their experience into a powerful testimony.
If God can do all this through a lemonade stand, he can do it through anything. He can do the impossible. We just want people to know that God forgave us, and so we can forgive other people.
Rebecca and Joshua, the youngest of 7 siblings, plan to use some of the funds raised for their oldest sister's missionary trip to Asia, with the rest going towards some new toys, like a 4-wheeler and a dirt bike. The Caldwell story is a powerful reminder that when life hands you lemons, you can turn them into lemonade, and with faith and love, you might just find yourself getting something far sweeter. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Terrific story in the midst of all that challenges. Wow, what a story. By the way, the suspect is facing a felony charge of grand larceny. You can get Christian World News delivered straight to your inbox. To sign up for our weekly email update, just go to cbnworldnews.com. Folks, time just flew by. That is it for this week's edition of Christian World News. Until next week, goodbye, and God bless you.